Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate you spending your time to hear my stories and their stories. So I'm Lola, Wilcox Moore, and I am the repairer of the breach. I'm working on repairing the breach in my paternal lineage. So my great-great-grandpa, Henry, was born in 1833. He had about 11 children, roughly. One of his children was great-grandpa Thomas, who's my great-grandpa, and the reason that we're here. And Thomas married Tilla. And so Henry founded the Wilcox Ranch, and my great-grandpa Thomas was the one child that remained, as far as I know, to work side by side with his dad. My great-grandpa Thomas never worked for any man in his whole life, from 1877 to 1941, self-employed except working with his dad. And he and my great-grandma Tilla expanded the ranch. And we're here 153 years later, which is pretty amazing for any people, not just black people, but for anybody. That's a huge feat. And so I am a fifth-generation Freedmen Settlement descendant. So the story goes that when great-grandpa Henry was kidnapped from his country and brought to this country, he was initially enslaved in Kentucky and then landed right here in Seguin. Yes, chattel slavery was right here in Seguin. So when he got his free papers, he walked a dozen miles to Jake's Colony, which is a freedmen settlement actually founded by one of Tilla's cousins, Jacob Rogers. So if you don't know what a freedmen settlement is, it is basically a city within a city where when black people were freed, they communed and connected and found whatever relatives they could find to build their own communities. They are self-sufficient. They have their own infrastructure. For instance, Jake's Colony, where we hail from, had its own Rosenwald School, its own Methodist church, its own cemetery, and several working black ranches. Back then, there were about 70 working black ranches in Jake's Colony, and we're the last ones. So I love my work because I get to amend American history just by being myself and telling the story as it is. So many people, like, now that the story's out, they hear the Wilcox name and they want to, say, oh, I'm a Wilcox. You very well may be a Wilcox. I cannot dispute that. But this work is specifically Thomas and Tilla. Thomas and Tilla Wilcox. That's what we're talking about here. So the house that we live in is the house that my great-grandpa Thomas built over a century ago. The house that my grandmother was born and raised in, and all of her siblings, right? There's 11 of them. My grandmother, Ella J. Wilcox Moore, her sister Marianne, they were the last two surviving of the 11 children. And so there are so many full circle moments for me with this work, like being at the library is one of those, for instance. So the old library was a far cry from this building. If you haven't toured the building, definitely do so, because upstairs is really nice, like you're in the trees. I love the building, and I frequent the library. So it is a full circle moment for me to be talking at the library, right? And how that came to be is definitely serendipity. I didn't orchestrate it myself. I could not. So Dr. De La Rosa talked to a reporter, called a reporter, who did an article about us maybe a year or two ago in the Seguin Gazette. And she called me, and we started talking, but I have to tell about the phone call. So when she called me, I returned her call, and the person that answered the phone said, I said, hey, this is Lola. I didn't get to finish anything, right? So she probably thought I was a solicitor. She goes, you have the wrong number, right? Or whatever. She hung up, and I was like, she thought I was a solicitor? Are you kidding me? I said, so you just call back one more time. One more time. And I called back, and then I think she got the message. She called back, and she goes, I apologize because that was my niece. So her niece said to her, do you know Lola? And she said no, and hung up on me. So she didn't know me, right? So she did. I mean, it was kind of awkward for me and for her, but yeah, she did. She didn't know Lola, right? You know Lola? No, I don't. And so so we started talking, and she's the reason that I'm here. Dr. Lola is the reason I'm here because the Big Read did a project, National Endowment for the Arts, with Texas Lutheran, with Teatro de Artes de Seguin, and the library. So it came about in a kind of a convoluted way because I thought I'd be speaking at your program in October, September, whatever, September actually, right? And it turns out, no, I ended up talking to Texas Lutheran instead. But Dr. Del Rosa and I made a real connection, and so that's why I'm here. That's the reason I'm here. It's not my own doing, and so it's pretty amazing that this is happening because I didn't orchestrate it myself. Like much of my work happens like organically. And so I believe in spiritual things. A lot of people may think that's kind of weird in some ways. I don't mean religion, I mean spiritual things. Like I am clearly one of the chosen ones for sure to repair the breach in my lineage. Not because I say so, just because it is, right? And so in utero, this is happening, or probably before my parents ever met, possibly is what I believe really, that I believe that the Most High and some of my ancestors know some shit that we don't know, right? And so in so doing, they knew my personality would be different. They knew that I would march to the beat of a different drum. They knew I had the gift to gab, to be creative and to be very clear about who I am, right? And so, and my brain's not very linear. Not the most organized person, if I'm truthful. But the way my work is, I can't get bored because I have a pretty short attention span, if I'm honest. But with this work, there's so many pieces, so many tentacles, I can never get bored. And I mean a lot of pieces. There are stories that are yet to be written. There are things we've yet to discover. And what we already have is pretty amazing. Like we have a plethora of stuff. These people, my great-grandpa Thomas, my great-grandma Tilla, were amazing to me. Like I have such reverence for them. I feel incredibly honored to be chosen to repair the breach in their lineage. That is a high calling for me. It's a huge responsibility and often lonely. My brother also has that calling. Like we didn't choose the work, it chose us. And another example of that is my brother. There's somewhere on these panels, he's with the cows as like a 9-year-old kid or whatever, right? And the same thing today, almost 50 years later. So we didn't do this on purpose. It's like we've been living the story, it's coursing through our veins. It's not an Ancestry.com story. It's not at all. We haven't used that much because we haven't had to. They left us a Bible. There's like a Bible that's over a century old. The house, the cemetery was land that my great-grandpa Thomas purchased from his cousin Daniel Ridley in 1919. So it's Jake's Colony Cemetery, also known as Ridley Cemetery. And we applied for a marker, a historical marker from the Texas Historical Commission, which will be inscribed this year. So that's a huge honor for us to be able to secure their resting place, because at this cemetery we have 4 generations. My great-great-grandparents, Mary and Henry, are buried there. My great-grandparents, Thomas and Tilla, are buried there. My grandparents, Ella and Irvin, are buried there, and our dads are buried there. Malcolm's my first cousin, his dad's buried there, and my brother, our dad's buried there. So it has a lot of historical significance, and it is, as I said, quite an honor to be chosen to repair the breach. Because in my parents' generation, things began to unravel. So like in the 30s, a lot of, not just 30s, but decades before and after, Black folks began to migrate to the west and to the north, right? And some people call it the Great Migration. Well, for me, I'm thinking, I'm not really sure how great that migration was. Because with that migration, we lost a lot of things. A lot of autonomy, a lot of, you know, like, it's like to be independent and have everything your own and be like insulated in your own community is very different than attempting to assimilate, right? So people talk about the civil rights movement, all that stuff, and integration, but really we just have desegregation. And that's not exactly integration, right? Just because people of different ethnicities can walk together or shop at the same grocery store, go to the same schools, even live in the same neighborhoods, doesn't mean our lives intersect. Doesn't mean that that's a fallacy, like American history, much like American history, right? So what we're taught is like a fairy tale, really. If I'm honest and truthful about the story, we've been told a boatload of lies, really. Like, you wouldn't even know that we were really here, right? And so even the land that we're on, like the Tonkawa tribe long before us probably, and there's another story about all African Americans ain't African. We won't go into that whole piece of history, but there's a lot of, trickery going on with who the indigenous people were in this land, right? But we know that whoever they were, they're melanated people that look like us, right? And so with this great migration, we moved from being an agricultural people to like being industrial. You know, women start leaving the households, working in factories, people move to different locations, and we start to separate, you know what I mean? And so how I was raised, I was born into a household with 4 generations. My great-grandma Tilla, my grandmother Ella J, and my dad, right? Today, that is like another world. Like, if I wasn't in it, I would never know it existed. That's how different we live today, right? We're very siloed and separated. Like, many of us don't even know about our ancestors, right? Where they come from. Like, I could ask a lot of relatives who these people are, they wouldn't be able to tell you. Disconnected, right? And I also understand everybody's got different assignments, right? We all come to the planet to do different things. You can't do what I came to do. I can't do what you came to do, right? So my philosophy is just stay in your own lane, right? Just be who you are and do that. And I'm really good at that. I'm really good at that. So I love that these people thought about us long before we got here. There was some consideration, some forethought. First of all, to purchase land in 1870, a black man, right, who just had his shackles removed and was quote unquote freed, purchase land before he turned 37 years old is an amazing feat, right? So we have the deed from 1870. In the deed, it says it will belong to his heirs forever and ever. And so, early 1900s, Thomas and Tilla began to purchase more land, right, to grow the Wilcox Ranch. Well, we know that Wilcox Ranch is Jake's colony. And we've been there all this time. Like, we've never left that land or that house or that sacred space, right? We have not. And that is pretty incredible, pretty impressive. And it's hard to impress me, but I'm very impressed by these people because of what they did. I'm like, how the hell do you walk out of chattel slavery and start a community, right? How the hell did that happen? How do you start your own schools, build your own houses, right? Start your own cemeteries. How does that happen? So that tells me that people had to be incredibly, like, way intelligent, right? Very creative, very tenacious, right? Their intellect amazes me because I couldn't pull that off. Even today, I think I'm so smart. We think we're so smart with our letters and our titles and everything, right? I don't know how they did it still today. I'm still questioning and learning. Like, how did they pull this off? So Henry and Mary had these children. Can you bring my water? Thanks. So Henry and Mary had these children, and I don't know where the other children went. We just know that Thomas stayed. And so my work, our work, Restoration Project is focused on Thomas and Tilla and what they created and what we get to maintain, right? So we didn't do anything to create this legacy. We were just born, right? So people act like you did some work. We didn't do any work to do that. We were just born, that's it. And so what I'm grateful for is that they thought about us. It still amazes me today. Like, these people, like, what the hell? I'm amazed that they were thinking about us. And they always said, hold on to the land, remember who you are, don't separate, you know what I mean? Don't sever the ties. Remember who you are and what we did and who we are. And so my work gets to repair that breach that happened with my parents' generation because people lost a lot of who they are and where they come from because we got caught up on other things. And all of us are caught up on other things. This world teaches us to validate ourselves by everything external, right? The letters before my name or after my name, my house, my car, my retirement plan, right? All that shit. And I'm like, okay, so take all that away and then what? Who are you, right? What are you? Do we even know? Most people don't. We just know what we're programmed to be and do, right? Mostly. Well, I think that kind of like, I missed that part. So I get to march to the beat of a different drum and do things that are creative and that are definitely different, set apart, no question about it. And I was born that way, unapologetically so. Yes, it makes it difficult to tread in the society because the society is set up a certain way, right? And when you're like different, as we call it, like neurodivergent, they have titles for us: highly sensitive people, ADHD, whatever they want to say, whatever it is. But I have no problem with the titles because I'm clear about who I am and what I came to do. And so everybody's got stories, but most people are going to die with their stories. That's a choice we're making. And so, yes, you may not have this legacy, 153 years in a ranch that your great-great-grandpa founded and your great-grandma and your great-grandpa solidified and expanded, but you still got amazing stories nevertheless. So part of my work is to encourage other people to tell their stories. Think about who you are, where you come from, and for me, most importantly, why are you here? What'd you come for, right? And so I didn't come to fit in, obviously. That's all. I don't need to say that part, right? I came to shake things up for sure, to inspire other people to think about things they don't normally think about. Most people are thinking about, who am I? What do I feel? What do I really want to do? That's not how we're trained. But that's how my brain is. So I encourage everybody to think about where they come from, who they are, and why you're here. And trust me, it's not about your job or your title or your car or your house. If you think it's those things, you've really missed it, okay? So I encourage people to go a little bit deeper, go a little bit higher, and really think about, when I leave here, what's left behind, you know? So these people gave me an amazing gift. I can't even take credit for it myself. But in telling their stories, I get to amend American history. And in repairing the breach in their lineage, I'm creating my own lineage, my own amazing stories, just by being who I am and telling their stories. That's all I have to do. That's it. And so I love the fact that, because I'm a teacher, a writer, you know, and I feel like this is a part of American history that was whited out. But I'm tripping like, how the hell do you tell back American history without us? Without melanated people? Are you crazy? Like, that can't even be. That just cannot be. So at the talk in October, I got a message from a student, and she said, it was an amazing presentation. I had an amazing time. I feel very inspired. And I grew up right down the way from Jake's Colony, and I never knew where the name came from. I didn't know what a Freedmen Settlement was, and this is right in my backyard. So I was like, that's a perfect example of me just telling the stories, and I'm into American history, something she didn't know, and she lives right here in Seguin, right? And another reason that people don't know is because it is safer for us to fly under the radar. Because if you know, historically, when black folks do something, white folks always come destroy it or steal it, right? They find a way. That's history. That's American history. So, for instance, in 1900, black folks owned 15 million acres of land, right? Today, maybe 2% of that land is left. 2%. So the great land theft is a very popular theme that I read about in history, but now we're living it. We've heard about it for generations in our family, right? And we're still living with it today. 2023, they still come for us. And I was like, you didn't get the memo? Like, really, you might want to choose somebody else to come for. Really, you just might want to. Because one thing we're clear about is who we are and why we are and where we are and whose we are. And those pieces keep me rooted and grounded. It's way beyond me. And I love that because it's not just about me. It's so much bigger than me, right? It's so many things that when I leave here, their place will be cemented in American history. No question about it. It's already done, probably if I died tonight, right? But there's so much more to do. Like, my children's book hasn't come out yet. The coffee table book, short stories, and documentary are the next things I want to work on, and curriculum development. Because people act like black people's history started with slavery. And I was like, what the hell? Are you kidding me? Like, seriously? Like, no. Let's get this straight. I am, therefore you are. Okay? Let's not get it twisted. And so we've been told so many lies. It's up to each one of us, though, to educate ourselves, right? If you want to know the truth, you can find out. It's right there at your fingertips, but you have to want to know things too, right? So for me, and my spirit is always saying, like, know thyself. Know thyself. That's the premise I operate from. Like, I don't go by what society tells me. or what I was trained to be necessarily. I am who the Most High created me to be, and who these people created me to be. I love the fact that they knew me before I knew myself. They really did. They knew my brain would be different. They knew that I would have a tenacity like theirs, you know? I don't take no very easily, you know? I believe in things that don't make sense, the natural, because they showed me that, right? What they did is amazing. It's incomprehensible in so many ways. So that tells me, just that piece tells me they had to be highly intelligent. You start your own community with nothing. I didn't even know if he had shoes, or what did he have coming out of slavery? Probably not much, right? That speaks volumes to me about who they were. It really does. Nobody gave them shit. They worked for it. They earned it. They bled for it. They sweat for it, right? And so it is my duty, and I take that with great pride, absolutely. It's very distinguished, for sure, to make sure that they're not erased from history. You know? Without them, I couldn't be. So I feel very, very grateful I get to tell their stories and help them live again, and make sure that their work doesn't go in vain, because they worked their asses off. They worked so hard, and it's a very painful story, truthfully, if I'm honest. I make a lot of jokes, but it's a very painful history. I won't lie about that part. I feel it in my bones. I feel it in my physical body. I have like a visceral reaction to it because I'm connected to them in the spirit realm. I didn't make that up. It's just authentic. It's just who I am. Like, their blood is coursing through my veins. And yeah, I feel some of their pain too. There's no way for me to be here and not feel that and not know that. He who feels it knows it. So I just want to encourage people to really think about American history the way you've been taught it, and pose questions, you know what I mean, and do your own research. Because right here, probably I don't know, a mile, not even a mile away, there's like a whipping tree. What the hell is a whipping tree? What? What if you try to run away from chattel slavery, you can get tied up to a tree and whipped? What kind of shit is that? What? And so people that they're worshiping in history were pretty sadistic, if you really think about it. Misogynistic, racist, ignorant as hell, and we want to follow them. So and my thing is this: if you think about, I don't care which topic you choose, academia, medicine, you know, religion, it's all been tainted to no end. So my duty to myself and to my ancestors is to tell the truth about what really transpired, and it is painful and it is ugly. The truth is, right? And so it's a bittersweet position that I'm in, a blessing and a curse in some ways, because I call it like the sacred setup. It's one of my stories. And it is that, right? It's sacred beyond belief. I was like, you guys set me up. First of all, I am an introvert, believe it or not. I'm just verbal, that's it. People think because I'm verbal that I want to be, in front of the camera and my name up in lights. I can't, no. But God's got a right sense of humor. Because I'm like, no, you know, God. And I'm really a hermit, and I'm a loner, and people get on my nerves quickly. I'm not a people person, really, I'm not. He is, my brother is. That's not me, that's not my get done at all. But the skill set I've been gifted, the passions that I have, like who I am innately, it's different. It's like it appears to be very extroverted, right? No, I'm just verbal. I'm just verbal. That's how a verbal introvert is what I call myself. So I was like, I guess I knew who to choose too, because I am a little bit different than, the average person or even people that I'm related to. So you're set apart to do certain things, to accomplish certain things, for me to repair the breach, So my brother is the steward of our ranch, the Thomas and Tilla Wilcox Ranch, and takes care of the cattle, the fences, the cemetery, everything, literally everything, which is an amazing feat because years ago, groups of people did that, not just one person. So that's an example of the breach, right? So when we were growing up, people came together, right, at the big house, right? Something needs to get repaired, the guys show up and handle it, right? So the fact that he's doing it solely is evidence of a breach, a disconnection, you know? So part of my assignment in repairing the breach is to tell the stories. I get to spark conversations, arguments, disagreements, but the fact that we're talking about it is a part of repairing the breach, right? Because we've been doing things differently than our ancestors, it's going to be uncomfortable for us to have some realizations and do things better, to grow, to stretch. And so as an elder, because we're the elders now, right? That's our charge, to do the work. It's our duty to talk to other people in your pool of relatives, to inform them, to enlighten them. Something I notice about the work is when I'm telling the stories, it always sparks something else in somebody else to tell a story. Like my cousin will tell a story about somebody, oh, remember this, blah, 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 blah. Without me doing the work, it probably wouldn't come up, right? And everybody that I've talked to, relatives, they tell me stories, I write them down. Like random things I have written down. It's not random now, I know that, right? So, as I said, I believe we were set up to do the work, but we didn't really recognize that most of our lives. We're just living it, like most people, right? You just live your life. You have what you have, you know, you do what you do, right? You are where you are. But in probably in 2014, maybe 2014, I'm not sure, somewhere around there, I started thinking about things differently. I looked at my life and I was thinking, you got a lot of stuff, a lot of pieces, right? And I think it became evident to me, and I get like what I call downloads from the spirit realm. It's not me, I'm not hallucinating or anything like that. Like, Legacy Restoration Project came to me from the spirit realm, you know? The Emergence of Lola collection, the title of one of my collections of ancestral greeting cards. But something that became clear, I guess, around 2014 is that you're the repairer of the breach. And I was like, what? Yeah, the book of Isaiah talks about repairing the breach. And I read and I was like, oh, that's me, I guess it is. Oh shit, right? That's a lot of work. Who, what? Are you sure you sure, like Gideon, like, are you sure about this, right? Yeah, the Most High, don't make no mistakes. Very clear. So what's interesting about this is we've been living this our whole life, right? But not through this lens. We've always been at the big house our whole life, right? Never left. And for my brother to be living there, doing what he was doing as a 9-year-old kid, and me, yes, at 9, I was writing letters, collecting stationery. That was always my thing. You'll never see me without paper and pen, ever. Unless somebody did something to me and I'm sick somewhere, stranded. But yeah, I'm always gonna have pen and paper with me. So we look at all the pieces, right? It's like they left us a box of puzzle pieces, and we are repairing the breach, put it together. The Bible, the cemetery, the house, the pictures, the letters, and our own lived experiences are a part of that. And so in 2014, we're talking, I'm thinking, I think something else going on here, right? And started looking at it through a different lens. It's clear you're repairing the breach. You guys are on a divine assignment. It's not a hobby. It's not something that we chose to do. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was a very spiritual decision that came from within. That we knew many years ago we would be at the big house, like when we're old together and it's gonna happen, right? Like, I don't live in Texas permanently, full time, I don't. But at some point I probably will, right? And so another full circle thing is that, like I said, if I'm writing letters as a 9-year-old kid, collecting stamps and stationery, and almost 50 years later I'm doing the same thing. I never stopped doing that. Like my brother never stopped being with the cattle. You know what I mean? Like doing what he's doing. Like what he does, don't really, me mending fences, probably not. Me cutting the grass, unlikely. Do I know one kind of hay from another? Well, no, right? But can he write? Can he write? Not. So we have very different parts of the assignment, right? Like what he does is a very necessary component to keep the ranch going, right? To keep it viable. I mean, come on, we're the last working Black-owned ranch in Jake's Colony. That is amazing. That's a huge responsibility, right? My part of the work is the griot. I tell the sacred stories. I do the writing, right? I make sure I've written him in the history. I make sure that what we do and what they did is not in vain. That no matter what I say, people get caught up on me and what I'm saying and how I'm saying it, they'll get past that, right? The truth of the matter is that because I do what I do and I am who I am, this stuff is going to outlive me, right? And that is really important to me. So 20 years ago, this is so crazy, I wrote a paper, and the last paragraph of the paper says, who were these people really? What were they really like? Do we share any kindred bonds? I wonder what kind of things we really have in common. I'd love to get into some of their heads and tell some of these yet untold, unwritten stories and write my way out of struggle and help some of these souls have a more peaceful rest. That was about 2004, right? Somewhere around there. So that paper, I promise you, when I wrote that paper, I was not thinking about them or any of this work at that time. But as I said, I already had a lot of the pieces in my life because I'm living it, but not viewing it through that lens, right? So the paper goes into a box, leather file box in the back of my son Cairo's closet for a dozen years. Maybe it was it was early 2000s. So 2002, as a matter of fact, I got it right, 2002. So it goes into a box. I got the grade. I remember where I was sitting or with the paper, because I was like, just want to complete the paper. That's all I was doing. And those words came to me. I didn't realize at that time I was speaking prophetically over my own life. So I like paper, so I kept the paper, right? The hard copy, yes. And thank God I did, because who has floppy disks today, right? So it's all divine. It's not me doing this though, right? So I find the paper a dozen years later. I think about that paragraph and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. In 2014, that's when it becomes clear, because God reveals things in time, right? To me, he's like headlights. Like headlights, you can only see so far ahead of you, right? You go that distance and then you see the rest, right? You don't see the whole destination at one time, right? So in 2014, I pulled the paper out, and I'm even amazed, like, oh, you're living this. That you wrote this, you posed these questions, but I wasn't expecting answers. I just wanted to finish the paper. Truly, I was not thinking about these people like that, or the work that I'm destined and ordained to do. I was like, let me hurry and wrap this paper up and get this completed and submitted. That's all I thought about. But there's always something else going on beneath the scenes, right? So I pulled out the hard copy of the paper, and I'm like, that's when I made my first ancestral greeting card in 2014. So it's crystal clear at that point, there's something else going on here, right? More than meets the eye, more than the average simpleton can see. And so I was like, this is something else. And then so I started getting all these unctions in my spirit and a lot of clarity, and some pieces come together. And so then I see, you have all these pieces already in your life. I didn't go research this stuff. We're living it, right? Nobody told me this. We're living these stories. It's coursing through my veins, through his veins, through her veins, through his veins, And we didn't make that happen. We didn't create that, no matter how smart we think we are, right? Or how creative we think we are. We didn't make that happen. It's a very organic thing. And so I love them too, because they know that I am tenacious, and he is, and that we're warriors in a different kind of way, much like they were. They had to do a lot to protect that land and to stay in one piece, because a lot of Black people were terrorized off of their land, right? And this government was complicit in stealing land from people through documentation. All kinds of land theft was happening, right? And it's still happening today, really. So it's tripping me out today, if I'm honest, what's happening to us. People always come for us, right? Always. I was like, but you missed something. They forget the spiritual component, that there's a hedge of protection around us, right? And as Thomas and Tilla's descendants, we are obligated to stand in the world in a certain way, to tread a certain way. Understand? I'm a very no-nonsense. I know I laugh a lot. People think I'm kind of like whatever, but I'm a no-nonsense kind of person. No pretense. I don't do bullshit very well. I really don't. And playing games, probably not. Like I said, I'm really like a hermit. Like, you know, like I'd rather be left to myself, my own devices. It's just best that way. But my gifts are not for me, right? So I can't like hide them under the bushel, right? You got to bring them to the light. You got to show it. You got to tell it, because it's not about me. It's not, my gifts are not for me. So that's why I'm here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I'd be like doing my thing by myself. What? So yeah, so that's why I'm here. And I feel very honored. Like I feel this is really, between having my son Cairo and this work is what keeps me. It's what keeps me rooted and grounded in a knowing, you know. It's not a feeling, not a thought, you know. It's not a fact. It is the truth. And the truth always trumps the facts. So that's what keeps me here. That's a huge thing, because people think about, well, why are you here? What's keeping you here? I'm very clear about what's keeping me here. Very clear, because my work's not done yet. The story is not completely told yet. You know, there are things that are untold, that are unwritten, that are unsaid, that are unknown even. Because another thing about the work is we keep discovering new things every step that we take. You know, they left us a lot of stuff. Branding irons, whatever, right? The Sacred Bible, that's from like 1808, I think it is, roughly, somewhere around there. And so that's quite a history, especially for Black folks, you know, to have written documentation of things. And our people were record keepers. Like we have every deed, every piece of property that Thomas and Tilla purchased from about 1900 till, I don't know, maybe the 50s or something like that. Like, in fact, recently, like, how many papers and documents? What? That's really them, right? We were even amazed just this year, in 2023, like, all documentation. I'm like, they were really serious. They were very serious and very intentional about us being here and about their legacy being here. And that is so beyond me. I didn't make it happen, you know, but I had the privilege, you know, the very distinguished honor of telling their stories. I really appreciate you guys coming. I love getting to tell their stories. I really love getting to tell their stories. And so just know that we're continuing to amend American history by telling their stories.